Hello, everybody. My name is Roulette, and we have our thread tracker, Young Death. It's a wonderful race today. I'm sorry for any technical delays. I know this is should have started 20 minutes ago, but the lovely staff at SpeedGaming has had some issues with the Twitch broadcast. Fortunately, both of our runners are still here. We have XenoWars on the left and Haldadrin on the right. Everyone's pronouns are he, him, and we're more or less ready to start. XenoWars already off. Haldadrin also is. Just a heads up, we're playing with standard settings. There's no runner agreements on for today. Everything's going to be the base tournament settings. Now that does still leave in quite a few interesting possibilities. This is a 6 artifact game, so there's a significant chance they will be skipping some areas of the game. Alright, just starting out, we already see our first trick of the run. Space jump first by scan dashing off of that little vine. They can get to alcove far earlier than they're meant to. They manage to find their missile launcher, which is basically what they're hoping for. That's one of the best things you can get in an alcove. That's going to open up a lot of possibilities. And in landing site, we see grapple in the morph passage. That's interesting. Grapple isn't often an item you see come into play in this tournament, mostly because a lot of our runners have the movement skills to maneuver without it. But there is the very real possibility that they will end up needing it. For example, if Magmoor has an item, it's theoretically possible to, of course, cross Magmoor without grapple beam, but it's very difficult, and many of our runners simply can't do it. Both of our runners choosing to head to Impact Crater first to grab their artifact hints and the free item. If there wasn't a missile at Alcove, they wouldn't be able to do this quite yet, so it's quite fortunate that they found that. Now, as I was saying, there are some tricks that are going to be expected in logic. That space jump first that we just saw is potentially logically required. So it's entirely possible that those are their first logical missiles and that they are expected to pick them up. There are some other tricks, such as bomb jumps and standing on enemies that can be expected of runners, but there are also a few that are disabled. To be specific, they'll be expected to do bomb jumps, scan dashes, jumping off of enemies, L jumps and R jumps, slope jumps, and standable terrain. So, there are also some other miscellaneous tricks that just cover broader skills like movement, combat, etc., etc. But everything else is going to be disabled for this run. Oh, hold on, XenoWars freezing up for a second, but fortunately we are caught back up. I assume that was just to sync the 2 runs. But now what we're going to see is both runners are likely going to head to Chozo immediately. It's possible that they will check transport tunnel. And indeed, it appears Haldadrin is going to do just that. Regardless, both runners are pretty much neck and neck. There's a very slight difference due to some movement and whatnot, but other than that, it's basically what you'd expect. Anyways, we'll see really quickly what our item at the transport tunnel is. And it's another missile expansion, nothing too exciting. XenoWars is going to go get that too before he heads to to Chozo Ruins. And XenoWars now picking up that missile expansion. Okay, so Haldadrin's going to be heading into main plaza quite quickly. We'll get to see from his stream quite a few of the item locations. Main plaza has a lot of items. There's the item in tree, which we're not going to be able to see. There's going to be the item by the half pipe, the item on vault ledge, and the grapple beam item, which we'll be seeing in the intro cutscene. So that's 4 items, 3 of which we'll be able to get a peek at. Looks like a missile expansion on grapple ledge. Haldadrin's struggling with the dash there, and an energy tank on the half pipe. I didn't quite make out what was on vault ledge, but it didn't look like a missile to me. Perhaps we'll get a better look when XenoWars passes by that region. But it looks like Haldadrin's heading straight for the Hive Totem. You see in Ruined Nursery, there isn't anything of particular interest. It's just a missile expansion. We'll get to see what's behind the missile wall in Ruined Gallery in a second here. And that's our space jump boots. That's a very important item in Prime. That'll really enable a lot more movement options. We see XenoWars checking their hints. Oh, I saw Gravity Chamber, PCA. I didn't see the other 4, unfortunately, but those are some pretty late game locations. That already puts deep Phendrana and quite a bit of mines into the game. And on Hive Totem, we see Morph Ball. XenoWars, unlike Haldadrin, is choosing to check Plate Beetle first, not liking what they're seeing, and they're going to unfortunately be forced to go the other way first. And now on XenoWars stream, I can see clearly that it's the Variasuit on Vault Ledge, which will enable our runners to head into Magmoor. On tournament settings, heat protection is on a Variasuit only. No other suit gives that. And we see a nothing item in the vault itself. So actually, because we're playing with 12 artifacts, or sorry, 6 artifacts instead of 12, that means 6 of the locations will actually contain nothing at all, and that little glitch-looking suit is actually just nothing. If they pick it up, they get nothing at all. Some other runners will choose to play with RAs that will make those 6 unused locations into something else, like missile expansions. There was this race earlier where that was Flamethrower, and another one where it was Wave Buster, but there's no RAs for this race, so it'll just be nothing. Haldadrin, who has the space jump boots and the morph ball for that matter, gets to check Plated Beetle without doing the fight and can quickly get in and out to get their boost ball. XenoWars grabbing their morph ball now. Haldadrin has a few choices there. It looks like they're choosing to head out of Chozo through the main entrance. What I'm imagining we'll see them do is probably grab Grapple Beam and head to Magmoor. It's possible they could skip Grapple, and there's also the possibility that they can check what's at Frigate Crash Site now that they have Morph Ball. Technically, I'm not quite sure if that's a beginner slope jump, but it should be fairly doable. I couldn't tell you if that was in logic or not, though. So, 3 possibilities, yeah. They could just go straight to Magmoor from the elevator in Tal, and they could check. They could go grab Grapple Beam. And they could also first check Frigate Crash Site. And it looks like they're not going straight to Magmoor, so we're going to see at least one of those. And they're going to grab their Grapple Beam right quick. Even though they already have Space Jump Boots, which can enable a lot of skips with the Grapple Beam, it is convenient just to have. There are a few places where that absolutely is quite helpful. For example, the Grapple Ledge of Chozo, although we already know that isn't anything important. They're also going to be checking Frigate Crash Site. Since they don't have Gravity Suit, this is actually going to be a bit of a trick. Now, this isn't quite something you can do just using intended mechanics. In our case, we're going to see... Oh, it's a nothing at Frigate Crash Site. That's unfortunate. We're going to see Haldadrin perform a scan dash to reach the item in Frigate Crash Site. That's also possible with an underwater slope jump. Since they do have space jump boots, that's actually quite doable. But the scan dash is definitely the faster method. XenoWars, meanwhile, has just acquired the boost ball. They're currently in the process of playing catch-up. There haven't been too many major divergences, but there's just been these gradual time losses, which is what you're going to see a lot in this tournament. It's just the little things that start to pile up and can make a bit of a surprisingly large difference between our runners' positions. XenoWars opting to grab this E-Tank on the half-pipe. And Haldadrin, contrary to my prediction earlier, is actually just going to head back into Chozo instead of heading to Magmoor. Which I would say is probably just as smart of a play. There's definitely a lot in Chozo that can still be done. Chozo is definitely a very dense item location. You're going to see a lot of checks very close together that you can get very quickly with relatively few items. And that just makes it the natural place to start checking. Even if you have a very strong set of starting items, gets a lot of good stuff really quickly, you'll often see runners opt to hang around anyways, because there's just so much you can do here. It's really very rare that it ends up being worth it to leave Chozo this early. And we see that it's going to be a missile and ruined fountain, so that's one of two Flaagra checks that, well, one of three technically, that they won't be needing. The other two, actually of four, now that I think of it, because there's also, Flaagra unlocks actually 4 checks. There's Flaagra's item itself, which would ordinarily be the berry suit. Then there's the artifact after you fight ghosts in Flaagra's room. They also lock that. You have to defeat Flaagra first. The other one is Ruined Fountain, which we just saw was just a missile expansion, so they likely won't be doing that. And finally, there's the check in Watery Hall. XenoWars is already at Watery Hall because they chose not to go get their grapple beam. In fact, I would say that probably puts them in a lead. Because again, it's entirely possible that XenoWars could complete this entire seed without the grapple beam. There's not a lot it's important for it. And we see that in the price of charge beam, we have the ice beam. That's definitely something they're going to be very happy to see. The ice beam is going to enable quite a bit. And XenoWars not going to be checking what's in Dynamo. We will, however, be seeing the second of our Flaagra items, and that's going to be another missile expansion. So that's both of the items from Flaagra that we could preview, and there's nothing that indicates Flaagra will be necessary yet. However, 2 of them we aren't going to see until they go and actually fight Flaagra, so it's still going to be up in the air whether it's necessary to do so or not. I'm guessing it's most likely that they're not going to do it, but you never know with these games. XenoWars choosing to take a safety save, always a smart decision. Meanwhile, we're going to see Haldadrin's opting not to do that, jumping up to Incinerator Drone's area. We'll have to see if the runners opt to do Zoid or not. Usually they will if they're just in the area. Upper item here in Gathering Place is just a missile expansion. So far, that ice beam has been the real treasure. We've seen, of course, some things we were expecting to. We saw our Very Suit, our Morphball, and I guess Space Jump could have perhaps been quite a bit later, but again, the ice beam is the real treasure. The beams in this game, you need all 3 of them, and it's very hard to predict where they show up. XenoWars opting to head straight to Zoid. Oh, and Haldadrin did end up taking that save. So they're going to have to jump all the way back up if they want to go in that direction, which it appears they do. XenoWars in the meantime starting Zoid. Zoid is actually one of the few random elements of this game. Zoid's phases don't always take the same amount of time. So, one way that runners will usually measure how good their fight against Incinerator Drone is still to sort of pay attention to the music. If the music loops during the fight, then generally you've had kind of a bad Zoid. There's quite a lot of variants you can get here, and it's unfortunate that there's no way that's known to make things consistent here. They've already gotten 2 cycles down, so it's possible that they could have a decent Zoid out of this. Of note, however, is that they won't be able to check both of Zoid's items unless Zoid happens to have their Morphball bombs or power bombs. Because there's the bomb wall in the corner of this room, which contains the second item. Like I said, though, if they do manage to find something that they can use to destroy that, then they won't have to worry about orphaning this check coming back later. Because that could be something you start to see in these runs, is that they'll be missing a key item that they need to check at some of the other locations. And that can result in some grief later, because they don't want to go back, because they've already got most of the items in the region. Oh, and nothing on Zoid. That is rude. That's very unfortunate. XenoWars taking the chance to reset out. A good decision, I would say. That saves them having to wait for the cutscene to end and having to walk back. Definitely a smart choice. Haldadrin is going to be just a short while away from getting the bad news himself. Likely we'll see the same thing. That's probably the reason that we saw them take a save earlier, so that they could save warp back. I'm definitely curious to see where XenoWars will go next. They have the various suits, so Magmoor is open in a sense, but without bombs or peeves. They will be forced to go either just get the one item in Lava Lake and leave, or they will have to go around through Talon and head into Magmoor the other way around. It's also entirely possible you'll see them just head straight to Flaagra. Actually, they can't do Flaagra because they don't have bombs. My bad. That was silly thinking on my part. My understanding of lies is sometimes I will think up possibilities before they're actually possible. One interesting thing is Haldadrin did grab the grapple beam, and XenoWars did not. So if they find power bombs soon, they will be able to check Magma Pool, which could have something of interest. Now, in previous races, Magma Pool has had a bit of a reputation for being both a check that's very unfortunately difficult to get, and a check which usually doesn't have much, or which often has quite a bit of value to our runners. However, they're running with a completely different generation system. Previously, they would use Bash Prime's Prime Randomizer, but now they're using Randovania, which is a different program that generates seeds in an entirely different way. So Magma Pool has lost a lot of its luster in the eyes of runners. XenoWars is opting to head into Magmoor and check the first item in Lava Lake. Hopefully that pays out for them. It could be a little bit bad if Haldadrin ends up going somewhere else. Haldadrin, when he visited Plated Beetle's area earlier, did not check these bits that require you to morph into the tunnels. Right now, he's using that little branch. He's going to jump on it and perform a scannable terrain glitch to head up there and take a look. XenoWars already did this earlier, so he's quite familiar with the fact that there is nothing of value there. And now we're going to see what's at Lava Lake in a minute. Oh, and that's a visor. That's not what we wanted to see. Ideally, we wanted to see bombs, but you're likely not going to see our runners complaining about getting the X-ray visor. Unlike the thermal visor, there are some checks that do hard require you to have the X-ray visor for you to obtain. That would be Omega Pirate in specific. You cannot damage Omega Pirate without the X-ray visor. It is not possible to do so. Every other location of the game that you would use a visor to get does not actually hard require it. For example, the energy nodes that you activate with the wave beam can be shot without the thermal visor equipped. You can hop on invisible platforms even if you cannot see them, and so on and so forth. That's something you see a fair bit of in this game, is runners just choosing to not get the visors, and that can often cause some grief. In particular, in the fight against Metroid Prime's Essence form. Visors allow you to see and target Metroid Prime normally, but unlike Omega Pirate, Metroid Prime does not require you to have the right visor equipped in order to damage it. So it's entirely possible to shoot Metroid Prime while they're still invisible and deal damage. But this is, again, like I said, a quite unfortunate happenstance. It's quite challenging. You'll often see runners go out of their way to do checks, even after they're already in Goma, just on the hope that they can find a visor. Haldadrin choosing, unlike XenoWars, to start from the Talon elevator instead of the Chozo elevator. You'll see them being able to do a bit more of Magmoor. Here in Twin Fire's Tunnel, we see that's our Spider Ball. Still not bombs, but it's a major item that locks quite a few checks, so they won't mind seeing it at all. That could mean that we have some nice things waiting for us in Phendrana. In particular, that opens up Ice Temple East. Apologies, I got my cardinal directions mixed up. And just a missile expansion in the tunnel, so nothing of value there. One fewer things they have to worry about power bombs for. We're going to see them heading now for the Triclops pit. It's going to be interesting to see what's there. Meanwhile, XenoWars is trying to perform this... Oh, it's actually climbing up to this Ice Door and Frigate, which will allow them to get into late Talon. Now, we did not see Haldadrin do anything like this, so it's going to be very interesting if something important is there. I also believe this wouldn't be in logic at our difficulty settings, but it could very well still pay off for XenoWars. And there was nothing in Triclops Pit of much interest, but we will see if the storage cavern holds anything. In just a second, as Haldadrin is blocking it. Alright, XenoWars manages to scale a Frigate crash site. There's nothing of value in the storage cavern, unfortunately, for Haldadrin. They already got a spider ball out of this, which was a trip to Magmoor, so I imagine they're feeling fairly pleased with themselves. Though, of course, I cannot see into their heads. It's definitely interesting. There are some curious choices that our runners are going to be forced to make. XenoWars now heading out of Frigate crash site. I didn't see what they saw, but I assume they didn't like it very much. There is still the warrior shrine that Haldadrin has to check. We don't quite know what's there. It's possible that could be our bombs. And there's also the possibility that they're going to be somewhere much more inconvenient. Our runners, I don't believe they'll be able to reach Phendrana without bombs. I forget how that morph tunnel is laid out, but I believe there's a jump required. And it's just a missile expansion on the warrior shrine. XenoWars right now choosing to climb up the room here. Which they can do in logic now that they have thermal visor. There are several tricks in logic, but invisible objects is not one of them, so that can be a fairly inconvenient one to perform. And the item they get here, that looks like wave beam. That played out for XenoWars quite well. By heading to the lava lake, they found the X-ray visor, and that gives when our runners find those visors, that can give them very important information about where they are and aren't expected to go. See, it was technically possible for XenoWars to have checked that item earlier, but XenoWars would have known that that item was not in logic, and thus there was a significant chance it wouldn't be required. However, because they saw that X-ray visor, that tells them, okay, okay, now I can do this item, and the game might actually expect me to do so. So you've already seen that, and that's again a wave beam for XenoWars. So I'd say they're quite solidly in the lead at this point. Haldadrin, unlike XenoWars, does not know that that item is currently in logic. However, it's possible that they could go up and check it anyways. Like I said, those platforms are still there when you don't have the X-ray visor equipped, so it's entirely possible to perform that without them. And it looks like that's just what we're going to see. So fortunately, Haldadrin not getting going to be putting this off too long, so they're going to be getting everything they need. XenoWars is also about to come across their spider ball. Alright, Haldadrin making these invisible platforms look like child's play. Gonna grab this wave beam. XenoWars sees his spider ball and nabs it. So it's definitely very good fortune for Haldadrin to have made that check out of logic, or at least out of logic for him. We know it's in logic now, but he does not have access to this information. That doesn't mean that XenoWars isn't still reaping some advantages from X-ray visor. There are now some checks that he can take previews of before he's able to get them, which Haldadrin will be unable to do. There are several locations where the X-ray visor, just like an ordinary X-ray, allows you to see through various materials to view what's behind. In some cases, there are opaque walls, which usually will require super missiles or power bombs to destroy. Our runners currently have neither, but with the X-ray visor, there will be quite a few where you can actually see the item that's behind the opaque wall without actually destroying it using the X-ray visor. Like, for example, Haldadrin is currently in a main plaza. If Haldadrin had the X-ray visor, he could take a peek at what was behind the tree, even though he couldn't actually go get it quite yet. Honestly, I'm surprised we still haven't seen bombs. Usually you see this item much earlier in our games. We're almost half an hour in, there's still no sign of it from either of our runners. And no power bombs either, for that matter. XenoWars grabs the missile in Warrior Shrine. Most likely we're going to see them go to check Triclops Pit next as well. And then our runners are going to start running out of ideas. Haldadrin, we see, is now actually going into Lava Lake, going to grab their X-ray visor and get out. We already know that that's what's there. Unfortunately, it's not going to be bombs. That's likely what they're hoping to see, but it's not going to be it. And they're in a bit of danger here, actually. They took quite a bit of damage, so they're going to have to play things a little bit more careful. They're up to at least 39 HP. That's certainly good, but there's, in theory, a lot of things in this room that can result in death, which is not something Haldadrin wants. Now, of course, a death is not the end of the world in this game. I've seen some pretty amazing catch-ups. The last run I commented on, which was Gollop versus Nanosite, actually did see Nanosite winning despite taking a death. And just due to better routing that just happened to pay off for them. But fortunately, it looks like Haldadrin will be leaving Magmoor safely and taking a save for good measure. Which will, of course, refill their health. XenoWars, of course, is checked to try Triclops Pit and Storage Cavern. Of course, we know they didn't see anything of particular value. Haldadrin's going to work to start. That's going to take them right to landing site. That's actually a new feature now that we've been using Randomania instead of Bash's Prime Randomizer. Is that now at save stations you can do something called a warp to start, which takes you to wherever you started the match. In our case, they're starting in vanilla locations, so that's going to be landing site. This can be very convenient for especially newer runners who aren't as familiar with the logical requirements of the game. Since there are quite a few places where you can get yourself stuck in a region, and where reaching a save station, warping to start, can get you back out. This is much more relevant in Prime 2, but it's also a very nice convenience feature to have for Prime 1. XenoWars is going to be heading into Late Magmoor, the first to do so of the two, using their spider ball to climb the spider track. Haldadrin, on the other hand, is heading into Chozo. It's now we're going to start seeing some real divergence here. It's definitely hard to say who's going to come out on top of this, because there's going to be a lot of checks we haven't seen yet. Most likely Haldadrin's going to be heading straight for Furnace. That's where my guess is, but there's quite a few things they can do. Although we are now starting to approach the territory running out. Oh, Haldadrin's going to go over to Magmoor. They don't have the power bombs to peek the Magmoor item, but they do have the wave beam to get the next item, and they can peek it with X-ray visor. Magmoor appears to have another nothing, as we just saw there. It might be a little trickier to tell in X-ray visor mode, but that item's texture was nothing. Oh, that's very unfortunate. XenoWars took a death. And for that matter, Haldadrin found the bombs. Fortunately, it appears that XenoWars isn't getting sent too far back. Plus, they didn't find really anything of value in that part of Magmoor between the save and now. Although I do believe that sets them back their spider ball, so they'll have to go back and find that again if they want to use it. Picked up their grapple beam, of course. Like I said, that's happened. They can set you back a fair bit, but XenoWars didn't actually have a whole lot he had to do in Magmoor, so he's not really going to be all that far behind. It was really just missile expansions the whole way through, and now it's just a lot of walking around he doesn't have to do the second time. And now he's heading up to, of course, to grab his wave beam. It's possible that he's forgotten about the wave beam, which would be quite unfortunate. But as we can see, that death actually cost him his wave beam. He no longer has it. Hopefully he'll remember it soon, or perhaps he's just going to grab Spider Ball and hop back out, grab Wave Beam right after. Again, I can't see into the runners' minds. Central Dynamo, unfortunately for Haldadrin, had nothing of importance. 2 missile expansions. I will be switching audio over to Haldadrin, though, as it's likely that he's in the lead now. I believe there are a few, well, there's actually a lot of checks that Haldadrin can do because he just found bombs in the item near Magma Pool. Very, very fortunate, very fortunate. It's possible that we'll see XenoWars get that in a minute as well. I actually wasn't quite watching their stream too closely, so I don't know if they got their spider ball or not. We'll see once they morph. They did not. I'm guessing they probably remembered that they have to go grab the wave beam and are just opting to do that now. Prevent more backtracking later. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. Haldadrin now choosing to go back to Zoid just to check the item in the morph tunnel that I mentioned earlier. Like I said, checking Zoid without bombs means that you have to leave this item behind. Not to mention you usually have to reset out because you can't get back out without either bombs or a very, very precise boost. Most runners do not want to sit and do the boost because it takes a very long time, so they choose to reset out. We're going to see if there's anything of interest in it on Zoid here in a second. It's an energy tank. Haldadrin looks like he's going to sit for the rest of the fight for that E-tank. You know, 3 or 4 E-tanks is generally what most of our runners like to sit at. Some like a bit more, and some of our riskier players will go with less. But having 3 E-tanks instead of 2 is just a pretty good advantage. We already saw XenoWars take a death at 2 E-tanks, so as you can see, there's a lot in this game that can chip your health away very, very quickly if you're not careful. XenoWars is going to be grabbing their spider ball very quickly. Unfortunately, now that we have our vision of where Morphball bombs are, we know that late Magmoor isn't going to hold much of value for XenoWars. And of course, Haldadrin going to see that nothing again. He already knows it's nothing, so he's going to be right at the door. However, seems he forgot that he has to pick up the Zoid item before the door will open. Even if it is nothing. You're likely going to see a check on Furnace now from Haldadrin. After all, now he has bombs, you can complete the puzzle in this room to unlock the door. Bombs also does put Flaagra into logic, so that's possible at this point. XenoWars choosing to give the later stage of Magmoor another go. Again, going to be quite disappointed with what they find. Hopefully we don't see another death. That would be quite unfortunate, but it looks like they're being much more careful with their health. Sadly, you did see them fall off the rail a bit too early and end up in the drink. Not where we want to see them. And as I mentioned, Haldadrin's heading straight to Furnace. We're going to see what's there, and we're likely going to see some checks after that as well. I mean, of course we're going to see more checks, but I mean more checks in that region specifically. Missile expansion in Lower Furnace. Flamethrower is simply going to have to be somewhere less apt this game, unfortunately. Speaking of, we haven't found any of our beam combos yet. Super Missiles, Wave Buster, Flamethrower, and Ice Spreader have all been remaining quite enigmatic. Ooh, that looks like Plasma Beam up there, but that might have just been a missile expansion. I didn't get a great look at that. I'm guessing it was probably a missile expansion since Haldadrin is choosing to skip it. Had another missile expansion in that room. Haldadrin actually performing some scannable terrain here to skip interacting with the statue. Ordinarily, you would have to go fight the ghosts, deal with the statue, get the statue to throw you onto that spider rail, and then activate the switch, but now he gets to skip activating the statue to go get the switch. He'll still have to fight the ghosts to use the statue to get to the other 3 locations, but he will be able to skip that bit of waiting, at the very least. XenoWars, it looks like, is going to be heading elsewhere. I believe that's the elevator for late Chozo, but I could be wrong. I'm not great at remembering my vanilla elevators. I play with them randomized so often. Oh, instead it looks like they're warping to start. That's a fairly sensible move. I don't know that there's a lot they could do at that part of the game without bombs. Or Plasma Beam, for that matter. We're going to see our first item off of the statue in a minute here. Now XenoWars is heading back to Chozo Ruins. With luck, they'll hopefully make the same choice that Haldadrin did and check the item next to Magmoor Pool. First, it looks like they're taking a peek at Tree. I don't believe Haldadrin did, but it looks like he didn't need to, just a missile expansion. Looks like they're heading to Sun Chamber, or sorry, Tower of Light, or whatever that room is called. I get mixed up a little bit. Regardless, it's the wave door across from this room, and there's 2 items they can grab. One is at the top of the tower and requires either a lot of missiles or some very careful scan dashes. The lower item can, of course, we can preview that just by shooting some missiles at the first set of pillars. The lower item they can grab either with the gravity suit or with a underwater slope jump. XenoWars is choosing to skip the scannable terrain method of reaching the room and instead using the vanilla method. That's entirely fair. It's a very difficult jump. Choosing to check the lower item first. And Haldadrin taking an elevator to go to the frigate crash site area. The lower item was just a missile expansion, very unfortunate. We know it can't be bombs, which is what they're most likely hoping for. So that's rather unfortunate for them. And I don't believe they actually have enough missiles currently to peak the upper item. I believe you need 12. I could be misremembering though. And now Haldadrin got a peek at that item. We previously saw XenoWars do a climb to go take a look at it. Unfortunately, just a missile expansion, nothing too important. And it looks like XenoWars is heading on the way to bombs, but they'll still be quite a bit behind Haldadrin just by virtue of their path they've taken. Also of note, we're 42 minutes in and neither of our runners have any artifacts at all. I didn't get a peek at a lot of the artifact locations, but from what I saw, they're in some pretty nasty locations. So mines of late Phendrana will both be required this game. XenoWars grabbing their bomb. Probably going to take a peek at the training chamber as well. And of course, training chamber, as we know, just has a missile expansion. So they definitely won't have to worry about coming back to this neck of the woods. However, it's rather unfortunate for the runner that they put it off this long, and that gives Haldadrin a pretty sizable advantage. Now XenoWars is going to be playing a lot of catch-up, checking locations that are bomb required, pretty much all over the place. Bombs you're expected to get very, very early, ordinarily off of Zoid. So there's actually quite a few locations you can do with bombs. Haldadrin didn't check all of them, so if there's something important on Flaagra, for example, and it looks like XenoWars is heading up to do Flaagra. If there's something important on Flaagra, or if there's something important on Wild, which it can be checked right after, especially since XenoWars has this fighter ball, then that could actually put XenoWars at quite a significant advantage. If we see our plasma beam there, that could really even things up quite a lot, even despite the death. But just a reminder, besides our 6 artifacts, the only items you need to complete the game are all the 3 beams. You'll need those, and you'll usually need space jump as well. You'll also, of course, need the Phazon suit, which neither of our runners have found. The Phazon suit is definitely the difficult one to track down, because there's only one item that requires the Phazon suit to get, and that would be the item in Phazon Mining Tunnel. But unfortunately, it could be in all other 99 locations, and we haven't seen it thus far. Haldadrin heading to Phendrana, and we're going to see what that holds for them. We're also going to see what's in this tunnel, just a missile expansion. They'll be getting it anyways, might as well. And we're going to start seeing some checks in Phendrana while XenoWars is starting to fight with Flaagra. Now, something not a lot of people quite know about Flaagra is that the little morph ball bomb slots aren't actual bomb slots. They're actually just damage triggers for the bomb type of damage. They also work with power bombs. What that means is that you don't actually have to enter the bomb slot to deal damage to Flaagra. All you have to do is lay a bomb close enough that the damage trigger overlaps with the bomb's hitbox. So a lot of the times, some of our more skilled runners, or if our runners find space jump, what you'll see is them actually jumping to the side of the morph tunnels before lowering the mirrors even, and laying a bomb next to it, which also still damages Flaagra even though you haven't flipped any of the mirrors. In fact, we're going to be seeing XenoWars trying that right now. Unfortunately, this is quite a difficult thing to do if Flaagra is still trying to take swings at you. So you'll see them having to deal a fair bit of damage before attempting that. XenoWars instead choosing to just knock the mirrors down for this second bomb slot. As more and more mirrors get added into the fight, you'll see the runners more and more inclined to be doing the laying bombs next to the tunnel strategy. Haldadrin checking the item in Ice Ruins East. Sorry, I get the two mixed up. And that is their power bombs. Their main power bombs, to be specific, which is a very big difference. In Metroid Prime 1, power bomb drops are very difficult to get. There's only a few places you can reliably get them. So having the main power bombs, which give you 4 power bombs, instead of just getting an expansion, which only gives you 1, is very, very convenient. Oftentimes you'll see runners have to make do with just having 1 power bomb capacity, and that can be a real hindrance. XenoWars struggling with the aim a little bit, but they managed to hit that mirror. Now we're in Ice Ruins West. Haldadrin is going to be checking, most likely, what's beneath the ice in this room. Unfortunately, I missed the ice item in Shorelines. I didn't quite get a look at that. But neither of these ice items are going to be available until our runners obtain Plasma Beam. So that at least tells us Plasma Beam can't be there, logically. Because you need Plasma Beam, and you would also need Plasma Beam to check those items, to get those items, rather. Haldadrin ditching their initial strategy and going for a standable enemies. This is actually something that is required in Logic, standing on those baby Shigots. And that's one of their artifacts in Ice Ruins West. So they'll be needing to come back there with Plasma Beam later. Next we're going to see a check-in of Phendrana's Canyon. This is ordinarily the location where you would receive Boost Ball. Our runners, of course, already have Boost Ball, so it's got to be something else. XenoWars struggling a bit with the Flaagra fight, but they're about to finish him off. This also opens an interesting choice for XenoWars. Now, ordinarily, you wouldn't be able to get the Artifact of Wild until much later in the game, but because they have Spider Ball, if they roll down the tracks after Flaagra at partway and then head back up, if they roll away far enough to unload the room and head back up, they'll be able to fight the wild ghosts immediately and check that item as well, which also requires Flaagra. First, let's take a look at what Flaagra gives us, and that's going to be a missile expansion. That was our most likely drop, but it's not one that XenoWars is going to be happy to see, especially given the amount of time that fight took. And Power Bomb expansion in that room for Haldadrin. It looks like XenoWars is going to choose to do early wild, however. Now, this is a trick that does get done in the actual Metroid Prime speedrun, but the method to do so without Spider Ball is much more complicated. There are several bugs crawling along the side of that wall, and if you manage to get knocked into the corner by one just right, if you lay bombs with the correct timing, you can kind of make your way back up just by staying in the corner. It's a very difficult thing to do, however, so you won't often see many randomizer runners who do that. You will see quite a few, but it's not within everybody's capabilities. XenoWars thankfully has the X-ray visor, which makes fighting ghosts much, much easier. Ordinarily, ghosts turn invisible during these little dashes you see them do, which means it's pretty much impossible to hit them until they reappear. However, with X-ray visor, you can see and track them at all times. The only way this fight could be faster for them is if they also found super missiles. So far, those have been evading us some. Nobody has found super missiles or any other beam combo for that matter. It'll be interesting to see where they come up. Haldadrin, meanwhile, is delving into the pirate labs. This is quite a common play. It's a very good part of Chozo or Phendrana to check. We're going to be seeing our first item in a minute here behind this, I guess you would call it a tank. In this room. And, ooh, that looks, I think that was an energy tank. I couldn't quite tell. I'm not great at the X-ray models. But they'll be unable to get that yet. If I remember correctly, they require super missiles to destroy that canister. XenoWars now heading back down into the main part of Talon. I didn't quite see what ghosts ended up giving them, but I see their tracker hasn't updated, so I assume it was nothing of importance. That's very unfortunate because those two checks tend to be a very large time sink, so it's often quite a conundrum for our runners whether or not to leave those two checks behind and hope they have nothing for the best, or to come back to them later. And Haldadrin found his plasma beam. Oh, that's not good news for XenoWars. The only primary requirements that he will have left is finding the Phazon suit. Fortunately for XenoWars, that can be just about anywhere. So Haldadrin will have a lot of searching to do if he wants to find that anytime soon. Now we're going to see Haldadrin try to perform a little cutscene trigger skip to avoid starting the fight with the Aero Pirates in this room. You're also going to see a little trick here at skips. Ordinarily, this would skip the requirement of Plasma Beam, but this also just saves time in general, even if he has it, which he does. By jumping very precisely and shooting a missile over the side of that barrier, which extends a little bit farther than it looks like right now, it's possible to hit that tower and knock down this location without Plasma Beam much earlier. And that is actually an artifact. We're going to see a few more items out of labs, and it looks like Haldadrin is choosing to check artifacts now. We'll get to see what the rest of the locations are. We already know, okay, Arbor Chambers 1, Ice Ruins West, Transport Access, Gravity Chamber, and PCA, which we already knew. That's not great news, but it could be a lot worse. By the way, I do apologize for missing the hints earlier. I'm sure some of our more astute Twitch viewers will have seen them, but I do not have Twitch chat open, unfortunately, so I won't be able to see that myself. And now we get to see the one cutscene that hasn't been removed from this game, apparently. Well, there's a few, but this is one of the ones that has it still in the game. Samus sees, oh, gasp, it's a Metroid. That's spooky. There would be a Metroid in the game called Metroid. I was not prepared for this. And we're going to see the pirate jump through the window. Very tactical maneuver. There's two items in this room. One's a missile expansion, and we'll see the other is also a missile expansion. The only item left in labs, besides that E-tank that Haldadrin skipped, I assume it's an E-tank, is going to be this item down here in Research Core. This is ordinarily where a thermal visor will be located, but they have to scan 3 terminals if they want to get it. The first terminal they scan will give them a little peek, and they see that it's a missile expansion. Most likely they're not going to scan the other 2 terminals, they're just going to head out the back. Ordinarily you would have to go all the way back through Pirate Labs and out, but because Haldadrin already had Ice Beam when he entered, he knew he could just head straight to Deep Phendrana. Most likely, while he's here, he's going to go to Gravity Chamber and grab his artifact. I know I would. And he already checked his instance, so he knows it's there. There are also several other checks he can do in the region. He has basically every item that would be required for checks, except for Thermal Visor, technically, would be required for some checks. He doesn't actually need it per se, but it would be required, logically speaking. He would also need Phazon Suit for, again, Phazon Mining Tunnel and Super Missiles for a few locations, but those hardly lock anything at all. He's more or less going to check everything that's here. I am curious to see if Haldadrin will end up doing Thardus. Again, in addition to grabbing all 6 of his artifacts, he will be in a hunt for Phazon Suit. Neither of our runners have found it thus far, or Gravity Suit for that matter, which also locks some items by logic. We're going to see him scaling up Phendrana's edge. He doesn't need to do it this way since he does have Space Jump and Grapple Beam, but it can be a bit faster. Haldadrin is going to be taking a peek into that room, and I didn't quite see what it was, but it probably wasn't something that he wanted. And there's this other item off of Phendrana's edge at the top, which is an E-tank. He'll be grabbing that. He's currently sitting at 5 now, which means he's pretty comfy. He's not going to be too worried about anything. XenoWars, on the other hand, still only has 2 from what I can see. Not where you want to be, ideally. It's better than nothing. We've had runners endure a lot harder without any E-tanks, but it's still not quite the feeling of safety that some of our runners want. It's possible that XenoWars is one of our riskier players and is used to these sorts of more difficult maneuvers, but it's still never comfy. XenoWars is going to check this item here and is going to be quite disappointed. It's nothing important at all. The E-tanks, though, is still nice. That does bring up capacity somewhat. And Haldadrin is going to be grabbing this upper item in Gravity Chamber, which is his artifact. Lower item was not the artifact this time around. He's going to be taking a peek to see what it is. It's a power bomb expansion. Tempting, but he's probably not going to take it. In other scenarios, he probably would take it, but because he already found main PVs and another power bomb expansion, he's not terribly worried about his PV ammo at this stage of the run. Haldadrin now has quite a significant lead. You see that he has Plasma on XenoWars, and he also has 2 artifacts. That's quite a significant lead. Haldadrin's struggling just a tiny bit with some of this underwater movement. It is a bit tricky in Phendrana's Edge. Meanwhile, we're going to see XenoWars presumably going to check Furnace. Got to solve the puzzle first, of course. The puzzle in air quotes, which is just to activate all 3 switches that they show you the location of. It's not a terribly difficult puzzle, but it does help you use the bombs after you just get them, so it's, you know, a decent game design. Pretty good game design. And the Haldadrin grabs another artifact. Now, here's the choice. Go to Thardus or leave him be. Looks like Haldadrin is going to check Thardus, or at the very least Quarantine Monitor, which he will not have to fight Thardus to check. So it's still up in the air whether he'll be doing it or not. Again, Thardus could have Phazon suit, so it's important to remember that there's a very real possibility that Haldadrin will complete Thardus. There's Gravity suit. That's a bit of the double-edged sword, because now that also means that once they stumble across Thermal Visor, if they stumble across Thermal Visor, that will open up a lot of Sunken Frigate, which very, very isolated checks. Not a lot of them, slow to do. Ideally, you'll also want to pick up super missiles for that first as well. And as we see, Haldadrin has opted to fight Thardus, in this case without the Thermal Visor. Like I said, the only thing that in this game that is a hard requirement for visors is Omega Pirate. Thardus can be defeated without the Thermal Visor. Usually runners will just memorize where his weak points are. But it's also entirely possible to beat Thardus just by guessing, in my experience. And the power bombs that Haldadrin has will also be helpful during parts of this fight. That can deal some fairly significant damage. XenoWars, meanwhile, going through late Chozo. Going to be dealing with statue ghosts in a minute. And XenoWars manages to defeat Statue Ghost without much problem. Doors are unlocked and he gets to do some checks. Unlike Haldadrin, he's choosing to do the first button after defeating Ghosts. But he does play the same skip, so there's not really a significant difference in how long that took. Like I mentioned, you can fight Thardus without Thermal Visor, but it can be a bit inconvenient. So there's a very real contingent of runners who simply choose not to do so until they find their visor. Plasma Beam at least does make the Thardus fight quite a bit faster. So it's, you know, it's much more quick than it would have been if Haldadrin had chosen to fight Thardus and hadn't found the Plasma Beam yet. Although it's unlikely such a scenario would have come up due to Plasma Beam's location in Phendrana. And we're going to see one of the uses of Power Bomb in this fight. You see, that actually ended the fight for Haldadrin much quicker than it otherwise would have been. And we're going to see the rock fall apart, unfortunately. Tink. Wave Buster! Of course! No, the game couldn't just give Haldadrin a missile expansion for his efforts. It had to rub it in, giving what is widely considered the most useless major item in the game. Now, funny thing, Haldadrin hasn't done Flaagra yet, so we might end up seeing this come up. Probably not, but it's theoretically possible. Wavebuster can actually deal damage directly to Flaagra. Oh, Haldadrin choosing to use Wavebuster just for the joke of it against those drones. But Wavebuster, like I said, can actually deal direct damage to Flaagra due to presumably some errors in the way that damage types are implemented in this game. It does so little damage that it rarely comes up. You end up needing something like 230 missiles before you can actually defeat Flaagra with nothing but Wavebuster. But it is still technically possible to do so. Haldadrin's going to be, now that he has Plasma Beam, checking this location, grabbing the artifact in Ice Ruins West. That's the Artifact of Strength. That's 4 artifacts. Still no sign of Phazon suit. That's a little worrying. We do have to go to the mines, though, for PCA, so it's possible we'll see it soon. It looks like Lighthouse has an energy tank. And it looks like Haldadrin's going to check Ice Temple. Unfortunately, he'll be able to do all of the checks in this area, both Mama Sheegoth and the artifact location underneath Chozo's statue, due to his current equipment. Plasma is ordinarily a fairly late item in the game, so there is always the risk of backtracking in some runs. Fortunately, he'll be able to get this straight away. After humping in the hands of the statue here, a passage underneath will open up and he'll be able to grab an item. XenoWars, on the other hand, is choosing to perform bar skip. Haldadrin, by the way, being rewarded with the Power Bomb expansion. Always a nice thing to find. Definitely better than Wavebuster, but not necessary at the moment. XenoWars, however, not having much luck with bar skip, which is understandable. It's one of the hardest tricks in the game thus far. It relies on a lot of janky physics. The only reason so many people know it is just because it's part of some of the more mainstream speedruns. XenoWars, however, turning back, giving up on bar skip. I don't blame him one bit. Haldadrin will at least be taking a peek at Mama Sheegoth. It's unlikely that he'll stick around to grab what it has. Unless, is that our Phazon suit? It is nothing at all. He will not be getting it. I didn't think it was the Phazon suit, but you can never be too sure from that kind of distance. Especially in such a snow-themed place. Everything kind of just looks a bit whiter in this area. Unfortunately, though, that's not going to be in his Phazon suit. Or perhaps fortunately, because it means he gets to skip a boss fight. Always a nice feat to have. Haldadrin, most likely going to be heading into mines next. Although, they could, in theory, go to some other locations that they haven't been to yet. Getting stuck on that wall a bit. Boost Ball can do that in some places. But this is looking to be one of our... It's not going to be such a fast run. That could change if we see Phazon suit pop up real quick here, but if Phazon's suit is hiding your frigate, which it very well could be, this is probably going to stretch quite a while. Haldadrin getting knocked off. Most likely Haldadrin is going to next check the power bomb grate in a warrior shrine. That will give him an item. After that, there's a few places he could go. Most likely he'll be heading into late Magmoor and into mines. But there's some alternatives, certainly. XenoWars appears to be doing some out of bounds here. Fortunately for him, that is allowed in this tournament. There were previous tournaments where out of bounds was disallowed. But this is perfectly legal in current tournament rule set. It looks like they didn't quite get what they wanted, though. They're going to be resetting their game. I don't know much about out of bounds, but I assume that they messed up. Either that or they just saw the item they were looking for and didn't like it. I wasn't paying too close attention. Regardless, out of bounds is one of the trickier subjects in this game, so you won't see it very often in races like these. There can be some cases where runners will do it during what are called multi-world events, where they're playing with other players. There are some cases where you just aren't able to do progress within logic for some time because you're waiting on somebody else to get something for you. That's often when you'll see runners employing more out of bounds, but like I said, this is a single player race, so that never really comes up. Haldadrin choosing to head into later Magmoor. It'll be interesting to see if they check geothermal, the vanilla location of Plasma Beam. They won't need Plasma Beam to actually get it because they already have it. But ordinarily, the door into geothermal is not a plasma door, but the door out is. So if runners don't have Plasma Beam, by the time they open this door, they'll only get to look at what's inside. And if they head inside, they will actually be trapping themselves in the room. Again, though, Haldadrin has Plasma Beam already, so they'll be able to grab it, even if it's something that isn't Plasma Beam in this case. There's also a standable terrain that helps skip quite a lot of this. You'll see after he raises the ceiling in this room that there's a rather spectacular spider track maze that you have to go through, but it's entirely possible to skip basically all of it with some well-placed jumps. A bit tricky, totally doable. Given the caliber of runners we're dealing with here, it's quite likely that they will, however, do it. And they're going for it. That's the first part done, easy peasy. I slipped up on that second jump. This is actually the slope jump. Theoretically, that could be required in logic. I don't know what difficulty it is. Nothing of importance on geothermal, unfortunately, for Haldadrin's efforts. Most likely going to head into workstation, check that, and then go to mines. XenoWars, in the meantime, is trying again to perform this out of bounds. In this case, it would allow him to skip the plasma door. We already know where plasma is, and it's nowhere near where he is, so this is not necessarily a bad decision. It could hold something, but obviously will not hold plasma ever, because out of bounds isn't in logic at all. But they'll be able to grab the Artifact of Truth quite early. Saves them from having to go back to Arbor Chamber later. However, at this point, they spent so much time on it, I would say that probably was a net negative for time on them. As predicted, Haldadrin is choosing to enter Phazon Mines. In this case, he'll be entering right smack dab in the middle. There's a few different things in this room. There's going to be, right now there's going to be this missile expansion that we just saw behind that power bomb wall. Fortunately, Haldadrin has the X-ray visor. It can save a power bomb by viewing the item before he tries to pick it up. Ordinarily, that wall is completely opaque. You cannot see what's behind it, and you cannot... There's no audio cues that would let you know what kind of item it is either. Performing substantial terrain here to skip the fight with the pirate in this room. And going to be heading, looks a bit deeper into mines after he deactivates his force field. Nothing of importance in the room with the big fans. I'm sorry, I know like half of the room names. I apologize, I don't know all of them. And next we're going to see a fight against the invisible drone here. In a few rooms at least, he has to go through a few more. One quirk about all of the large pirates like that, those Phazon pirates, one quirk about them is that they can't actually start attacking you until they turn to face you. Ordinarily that happens very quickly because they're directly in front of you or because players do not actually strafe around them. But if you actually know about this behavior and take advantage of it, it's possible to essentially make it so that they can never attack you by constantly strafing around them before they can get a good look at you. And that's actually what you saw Haldadrin do right there. You'll notice that he did not actually at any point get attacked because he was strafing around them. That works for all of the Phazon pirates, including Omega Pirate, which you may see later in the run. Even Omega Pirate has this bug, since Omega Pirate is based off of that behavior. Right now, Haldadrin performing the Morph Ball maze to grab this item. As we can see, that's I believe, a feed combo. That's Ice Spreader, specifically. Now, grabbing that item is actually necessary to progress further. Otherwise, having the maze in memory while you move into another room can cause the game to crash. Although it's theoretically possible to do so, it's just not advised. Haldadrin choosing to make a save. That's always a smart play going into lower mines. Even with 5 E-tanks, it's a very dangerous place. Not to mention they're currently on the search for a Phazon suit. It is, however, quite fortunate that Haldadrin did find Ice Spreader. Ice Spreader is very useful in the fight against Exo, Metroid Prime Exo. It's one of the best beam combos in the game, in most people's opinions. Unlike the Super Missile, the Ice Spreader doesn't open up any checks, but it's just a very good tool to have for combat. And now we're going to see Haldadrin entering MQA. Now this is another room with invisible platforms. He has the visors, he needs to see them, fortunately. But like I said, it's entirely possible to see and hop on these visors, or on these platforms rather, without the required visor. That won't be required by tournament logic. Invisible objects is not a trick as enabled by default. But it is possible to enable that and generate games that do require you to use that trick. Fortunately, Haldadrin also has lots of power bombs, so these power bomb walls won't be draining him at all. XenoWars, however, still does not have power bombs, and it's going to be quite a while until he sees them. He's heading into Phendrana Drifts next to Thardus right now. It's likely that he'll be getting a taste of Wavebuster in a minute, which is not something that anybody wants to see, but he doesn't know that, so it's entirely possible he can engage Thardus in hopes of a Phazon suit or power bombs or super missiles or even plasma beam. There's the gravity suit and Phazon monitor, which we already know about. And fortunately, it looks like XenoWars is choosing to skip TARDIS. That alone is going to be saving several minutes for them. That's going to help a lot in catching up to Haldadrin, but there's still a pretty substantial lead that he has at the moment. Both in terms of items and in terms of artifacts and position. There's just a lot that he has here that XenoWars does not. XenoWars choosing finally to check their hints, or at least choosing to recheck them. Ice Ruins West, Transport Access, Control Tower, Gravity Chamber, and PCA, which we all knew again because we already saw them. Haldadrin choosing not to do the Phazon mining tunnel without a suit, mostly because he can't. He doesn't have enough energy. And it's a missile expansion, of course, so why would you? And the energy tank down there, always convenient. Going to be performing a bit of a slope jump to skip going all the way around back and starting this room again. So the fungal halls can be a little bit annoying if you aren't too familiar with them, but once you get the hang of it, it's a lot easier to navigate them. The problem is mainly that they're so dark and that it's quite difficult to see where you are. Performing a bit of a scan dash to skip going over the rail. Also going to be checking that item, just a missile expansion. Next, they're going to be heading into Omega Pirate. It's entirely possible that our Omega Pirate is vanilla. That our Omega Pirate is where the Phazon suit is going to be. There's also the item behind Omega Pirate, which we're going to be seeing shortly afterwards. Again, since X-Ray Visor was so early, this is entirely illogic. There's nothing here that would be preventing them from doing this right now. XenoWars, meanwhile, is in Gravity Chamber trying to grab their second artifact. They failed to jump a little bit, but they have Gravity Suit already, unlike Haldadrin when he was visiting. That's also going to be his first power bombs of the run. Power bomb expansion in lower gravity chamber is going to enable him to start doing some checks that require it. Main power bombs, as you'll recall, was in Ice Ruins East, so he probably won't be seeing that for quite a while. Haldadrin getting some nice damage into Omega Pirate, but the other pirates are going to be, the beam pirates are going to be a little bit annoying here. Omega Pirate has a very specific way to choose which pool he starts spawning in. Rule number one is that Omega Pirate cannot spawn in the same pool twice. Beyond that, he'll choose the pool that's farther away from the player. So by alternating which pool you stand at, you can actually manipulate Omega Pirate's positioning to make him show up at one of the pools specifically. And Haldadrin's fight is over. We're going to see what's on Omega Pirate in just a second here. After this very, very needlessly long cutscene plays. It's not that long, but it's a little annoying. Missile expansion. There's still a possibility of Phazon suit being this next item that's going to be on the way out of OP. XenoWars currently at Phendrana's edge. By the way, I didn't see if I got the artifact in Gravity Chamber. I assume I did. Ah, yes, that's right. The artifact of Warrior was here. I apologize. I forgot some of the artifact location names. That's mostly because I don't know the room names very well. My bad, my bad. Now, Haldadrin's most likely going to be starting to check early mines. Or upper mines, rather. They might also try and go to Late Talon and grab some items there. I believe the artifact they're missing right now is the one in Arbor Chamber, but I could be wrong here. XenoWars grabs their 4th energy tank, always good to have. He's going to be feeling a lot safer now. And what you saw Haldadrin do is actually skip the fight trigger again on the way out this time. Power bomb expansion in this room. Already has 6 of them, so he doesn't really want another. Ordinarily, in the front of that room, there's a fight trigger. That starts the fight with the Phazon pirate in that room. But if you use that standable terrain, you can actually maneuver around it, so you don't have to watch the cutscene and have that barrier come up behind you and force you to fight him to get out. Very convenient, sir. Very convenient, certainly. I don't know if that's actually in logic, though. I think somebody will have to check that at some point. Now we're going to see how the Haldadrin checks some more items. Up here, this is at the top of mining. Just a missile. Always good to have, especially now that he has Ice Spreader for Exo. So missiles are going to have some real value during the final boss. Meanwhile, XenoWars has 10 fewer, 75, still a very respectable number though, so probably not going to be too disadvantaged in the final boss. At least not in that regard. Obviously, XenoWars does not have the Ice Spreader and will be at a disadvantage in that manner until he finds it. Now, Haldadrin in this room is actually behind a one-way wall. You're ordinarily never supposed to see the wall from this side, so it actually has no texture. The wall is still there. He can't just magically pass through it, except for when he can. Currently, he's doing a trick to do exactly that. By boosting into the wrong side of the wall over and over, you can build up enough speed to actually just kind of pop out on the other side. So he's going to be doing exactly that. And you can see he just passed through. He's going to use his X-ray visor to check the item over here. I can't quite tell what that is. Looks like he's going to go get it, though. It didn't look like a suit. I think a suit would have been something I could have actually visibly seen, but I'm assuming that's probably a beam combo then, or maybe an E-tank. Again, I did not get any look at that at all. Oh no, that was a nothing item. I'm very unfortunate. He's going to be checking the pirate down here, which is the other check in this room. I believe it's called Research Center. Or, I mean, Elite Research, my bad. This is ordinarily where you would get one of the artifacts, but in our case, it's going to have the thermal visor. Interesting. So that's some bad news, because that puts Frigate into logic, having all the beams, having thermal visor and gravity suit. That means that our Phazon could very well be in Frigate. Not every check in Frigate is going to be in logic, at least until we find the super missiles, which do lock one of the checks, if my memory serves me. But that is now going to be a concern in the back of our runners' heads, specifically of Haldadrin's. XenoWars, fortunately for his mental state, has not found the thermal visor yet and is not thinking about that. But Haldadrin has already gone through quite a few checks and has not found the Phazon suit, which can, again, be anywhere except Phazon mining tunnel, which we already saw to be a missile expansion. The next check he's going to be doing is a room up of the security center. Or whatever this one's called, I apologize. I'm not good with room names. This plasma door would ordinarily hold the flamethrower, but in our case, we'll have to see what exactly it is. XenoWars, meanwhile, going through Pirate Labs. Most of the way through, actually. There's only a research core left for him to check, and that was a missile expansion we remember from earlier. Oh, actually, my bad. They were entering Pirate Labs backwards. So they actually get to see that this cutscene right now. It's a very, very, very spooky Metroid. August is basically October. We'll call this a Halloween moment. Haldadrin finding a missile in security access. There is going to be an item in main quarry. It appears they're going to go get. Missed the jump there. It's a little bit precise. Certainly very doable, and it should be in logic. But again, it can be a bit tricky. Especially with the turrets shooting at you, he'll most likely be destroying those. And we already know, again, Control Tower has an artifact, which XenoWars is about to go grab. Haldadrin activating that waypoint, which will swing the crane over and let him get a peek at the item in main quarry. He actually skipped the trigger for activating the pirates that are up here, so they'll just kind of be standing in place. They're actually pretty chill if you don't run across that particular part of the map. There's also something we'll be seeing from XenoWars shortly. An observatory, pirates there will not activate until you take certain measures. So we'll be able to just see them kind of standing there, doing a whole lot of nothing. Since we're going into observatory backwards. Haldadrin exiting mines, heading into Magmoor. Or sorry, heading into Talon, my bad. He's taking the elevator off of main quarry, not the one off of... Regardless, this will put him in late Talon. Very good place to be, because this is where most of his remaining chicks are. He still also has... remember, he did not do Flaagra, he did not do Wild yet, so those are still going to be bothering him, most likely. He's going to be thinking, oh, is it there? There's a chance we could see him go and try to go do those if he doesn't find it too quickly. Haldadrin going to be performing bar skip skip, where you skip having to perform bar skip. In other words, performing it as intended. And just checking some of these items up here. You can see Haldadrin there actually, even though he has all six of his power bombs. He actually had 0 ammunition for them, so he was having to go searching for a power bomb to continue playing the game. Like I said, Prime 1's power bomb drops can be very finicky and unkind. This is something that the developers ended up addressing in Prime 2. Another quirk is this particular room has some very janky ramps. The half pipe specifically for the boost ball. Those cracks you see in the floor are actually physically there, and it's very difficult to perform the boosts required to get up. At least in that specific tunnel. You'll often just kind of lose speed for no reason, and it can be a bit annoying. He's going to be checking the second item in Life Grove shortly. XenoWars, on the other hand, just got our Plasma Beam in Observatory. Very good news for him. He's going to be happy he's finally seeing it. Meanwhile, he has to kill the pirate so he can leave. The jump to get out of Life Grove can be a bit tricky, but Haldadrin makes it no problem. Now, we still have not seen our Phazon suit. It looks like Haldadrin is most likely going to be going to Frigate next. Okay, first item of Frigate is going to be in this room right here. It looks like we get some good music today, although I'm sure our runners aren't feeling too happy. This particular area requires, well, the way they're doing it, some pretty tricky bomb jumps. Only reward is a missile expansion. We'll see what later Frigate has to hold for them. This is most likely where our Phazon suit is going to be. I don't know if there are locations anywhere else they haven't checked yet. I haven't been keeping perfect track. But there aren't really that many places left to go. I always liked Frigate. It's kind of a shame that it doesn't come up more often. Because it's for speedrunning purposes, it's not a place you want to go. Even if it is very, very pretty and has a great music. XenoWars taking a save off of Observatory, and oh. Is that a Phazon suit? That location is super missile blocked. He needs to come back here with super missiles to get his Phazon suit. That didn't look like a nothing item to me. Nothing items have a texture to them. That was very flat and shiny, which is... And he has both other suits. This can't be Gravity or Varia. We know that for certain. And so does he. So he's probably having some very, very angry thoughts at whoever generated this seed right now. On the, I guess you could call it a bright side? On the bright side... Oh, and hey, there's Flamethrower. He'll likely be grabbing that for the meme. Run has been... Oh, wait, no, that's super missiles. I'm silly. I'm sorry, I cannot tell colors very easily, so... Fortunately, he'll be able to just go right back up and grab Phazon suit. After that, the tracker appears to show that he has one artifact left he needs to get, which would, I'd assume, be an Arbor Chamber. Shouldn't take too long to get. All he has to do is head back to the landing site, go grab it. He can either head back there just through walking or take a save warp. Although there aren't really any save stations nearby, to my knowledge. There's our Phazon suit for the game. So yeah, that actually puts Haldadrin at quite a big advantage, because he managed to find that without ever going to Flaagra. Which will end up costing XenoWars quite a bit of time between this and... Oh yeah, that's right, there's this save station. He's going to be warping to start here, most likely. Gonna go grab that artifact at Arbor Chamber, and then completing his game. Yeah, you can see he actually went back in the save station to perform a warp to start. If you press no in that menu and then press, I believe it's Y 3 times, it will warp you to the landing site, which is where they started. It will warp you to wherever you started, even if you start with somewhere different. In our case, though, it is just landing site. The only major item we have not seen this game is Flamethrower. Unfortunately, our runs will not be valid. And yeah, Haldadrin heading up to Arbor Chamber real quick. XenoWars in the meantime is still feverishly hunting for his Phazon suit. He's not going to see it for a long time. That's quite unfortunate. If he ends up heading into upper mines first, unlikely but theoretically possible, he could see the thermal visor and choose a less lengthy route, but there's not really a lot that can be done. He will still need to go kill OP to get the item behind OP, which is an artifact. Now we see Haldadrin grabbing the final artifact of the game that puts him in go mode. Artifact of Truth acquired. Now he's going to be heading straight to Artifact Temple, most likely taking a save in a ship first. Maybe not, since he already did save in Frigate, as we just saw. But a ship save would also refill his missiles. Very useful since he has both super missiles and the Ice Spreader, not to mention Wave Buster. So he can get quite a lot out of his missiles this game. It's fortunate that he picked up quite a few. Sometimes you see our runners choose to save a few seconds every here and there by skipping missiles. And that can pay off pretty big if you end up not finding any good beam combos, which save time during exo. But the amount of time that beam combos save in that fight is pretty significant, so most of the time you'll see runners just choose to grab this on missile expansion. They're also useful for just combat in general, since you can fire them so quickly. They're generally a lot more valuable than they are in Prime 2. At least in my experience. I know some others may have differing opinions. We saw the ship save take place, so that'll be leaving Haldadrin with full ammo and health, minus the 5 health that he lost in that room. There are 2 fights that he'll have to do. First, he'll be fighting Meta Ridley here in Artifact Temple. Afterwards, he'll be making his way to the Metroid Prime fight shortly thereafter. Fortunately, he can skip these cutscenes right here and just scoot right to the chase. Now this first phase is pretty easy. Ridley just kind of flies around and you shoot at him. Straightforward. Occasionally he'll do that. I don't know how he went inside the building. That doesn't seem like something he should be able to do. Next we'll be seeing him sort of start dive bombing and it's whatever. Next we're going to be seeing oh, I know, he's still doing that. Next we're going to be seeing a little trick. By boosting into Meta Ridley, you can actually deal massive damage. You'll notice coming out of Morphball now that his health bar is much smaller than it used to be. Meta Ridley actually doesn't have any immunity to Boost Ball, unlike any other boss in this game. Boost Ball actually deals an amazingly large amount of damage, and it deals it on a per frame basis. So anything that isn't immune to Boost Ball, which Ridley Phase 2 is not, is going to die basically instantly. Unfortunately for our speedrunners, that isn't something you can use to kill Ridley immediately. You still have to deal with his third phase gear like normal. But it does save a significant amount of time on this fight, and it's very easy to do. You can even do it yourself at home. And that's going to be Meta Ridley done for. 1 boss left to go, 2 phases to be specific. We're going to be seeing Metroid Prime fight, and after that it's GG, and we'll be able to talk to Haldadrin about how bad this seed is. 2 hours in, and well, almost 2 hours in, and we're just finishing up. This has been quite a lengthy seed, certainly. XenoWars, meanwhile, heading back down. Unfortunately, it appears they are not fighting Thardus, which, as we already know, would be completely unnecessary to do. They have 4 of their artifacts and their plasma beam. They will need to find their Phazon suit, and of course we know they're going to need to find their super missile as well. A thermal visor is also probably going to show up. Haldadrin is now an impact crater, the final region of the game. They're going to be performing a skip here, which allows them to skip most of the room. However, two Metroids named Jack and Jill are going to be giving him a bit of trouble if he lingers too long. It appears, though, that he makes it up without any problems, and is going to be heading straight up after quickly dealing with the Metroids in question. Until you actually reload the room, those Metroids will respawn infinitely, so if you don't have power bombs to do what Haldadrin just did, that can be a real pain in the neck. Unfortunately, though, nothing about Impact Crater actually is giving him trouble. Originally, there is going to be a lot more to Impact Crater. You can kind of see little inklings of this. After the final boss, there's kind of a quote-unquote escape sequence, but it's entirely a cutscene. It's possible that the escape sequence was going to be part of actual gameplay at some point, though. Now entering the fight against Metroid Prime, we already see a lot of use coming out of our beam combos. 2 super missiles into Metroid Prime. Super missiles have the useful property that they actually home in on enemies, so it makes hitting Metroid Prime a lot easier. XenoWars checking their artifacts. They see one is going to be in PCA. And that's just about going to wrap up Phase 1 of Exo in a minute here. Might need to deal a bit more damage. Oh, and I think Haldadrin might already be on Phase 2. I might have just missed the phase transition. Sorry, being one commentator for 2 streamers is a little bit challenging at times. You'll have to forgive me if I miss things here and there. You saw that Haldadrin use the Ice Spreader. The first shot missed, which isn't very common, but can unfortunately happen. The second shot, though, is a hit. Ice Spreader is probably the most useful beam combo to have for this fight, because the Ice Beam shots are actually very hard to aim. It's hard to aim a charged Ice Beam shot, so Ice Spreader makes things a lot easier in this fight, just in general. Super Missiles, as I mentioned, also a good one to have. We also see them using it to great effect. They're already down to just 27 missiles. That's how many they've been using. These missiles are just indispensable during this fight. You get so much out of them. XenoWars is now heading deeper into mines. Pretty soon he's going to be greeted by his Ice Spreader after he fights the drone, which presumably he will do. Again, search for Phazon suit, so he's not going to be skipping such a quick check. That'll be coming up in a few rooms here. Haldadrin enters the next phase of Exo. This is actually, pardon me, this is actually the last phase of Exo. And for the final phase of Exo, Exo gets to choose to do a lot of crazy things. Exo can charge whenever they want, they can change phases whenever they want. Previously, there were at least some basic rules that Exo had to follow. But here, they can be completely random and give our runners a very tough time. Excuse me, I am a little bit hoarse from just how much I've been talking for the past 2 hours. I didn't quite expect to see they go on for this long. XenoWars is going to be grabbing their Ice Spreader now. convenience to be certain, but they're not going to be too happy about the lost time of the Morph Maze. Now the Morph Maze is actually, I mentioned Zoid being one of the random elements earlier, but the Morph Maze is also random for both of our runners. They can get different Morph Mazes that are faster or slower. XenoWars 1 looked pretty good to me. It could be better, certainly, but that was not bad. Haldadrin is now done with Metroid Prime Exo. Now he's going to be heading into Essence. This is going to be quite good, quite quick, because Haldadrin has all his visors. Yeah, he's not going to have to worry about invisible Metroid Prime. It is still, however, fairly, there's still a bit of luck involved here, because you can get cases where Metroid Prime will skip laying down a pool, and that can be very lucky, especially if he lays one down near to the exoskeleton of Metroid Prime Exo, which it appears he has. It doesn't look like we're having that problem right now, but it's going to be a bit complicated. Right now, what you'll see is Haldadrin is not firing continuously. He's actually moving in and out of the pool very, very quickly. This allows you to preserve it for a little bit longer and get more damage out of it than you ordinarily would be able to. This can help end the Essence fight a little bit quicker. They're also going to be reaping the benefits quite a bit from the 6 power bombs that they have, because they'll be able to destroy the Fission Metroids quite easily. XenoWars Reference still only has the 1. And this is not going to be something they're going to be able to do quite so much of, so they might have to deal with them in more conventional means. Essence is now below half health. I'm sorry, did I say? XenoWars taking this save. Very smart move, very smart move. They're going to be heading further into mines. Using their 1 power bomb to blow up this bit of mandatory to destroy waste. Metroid Prime is almost dead for Haldadrin. That is almost, we're almost done with the game. Just got to get 1 more pool and then finish Metroid Prime off. And XenoWars, on the other hand, is just heading into Metroid Quarantine A. Hopefully Metroid Prime will drop the pool soon. Looks like they're being just a tad rude right now. Just a little bit polite. Remember that they can only be damaged with the Phazon. We're just kind of in the waiting mode now until we get a pool. After that, the game's pretty much over. And that's going to be time. Haldadrin has won the race. We're going to be switching audio over to XenoWars, by the way, just because this is, cutscene credits. Don't need to hear that. XenoWars now heading into the lowest level of mines, fortunately. Still, This is match is going on for a very long time. It's unfortunately rather slow seed. Sometimes we see seeds that end in well under an hour, but this is just not one of them. Like I said, we see this escape from Impact Crater as a cutscene. Originally, that was planned to be actual gameplay, but unfortunately, Metroid Prime is very, I don't want to say slapdash, but it was rushed in a lot of ways. There were a lot of things that had to be cut. For example, there was one point in time where Kraid was meant to be in Metroid Prime, but that never came to fruition. We should be getting joined by Haldadrin pretty soon in the commentary chat, and we'll be able to ask them all about their run and how much it sucked. Or how much, rather, the seed sucked. They were obviously an excellent player and did quite well. XenoWars also performed quite well under pressure, but some routing decisions that I definitely saw early on is just, unfortunately, what cost them the race. It was certainly quite back and forth initially, but yeah, it ended up going to Haldadrin. XenoWars now making their way through Fungal Hall, but unfortunately, they're going to be searching for Phazon suits still, because again, it can be anywhere, and they do not know that it's going to be in one of the worst possible locations. So they're going to be checking a lot of stuff along the way, pretty much anything they can to avoid going to Frigate. Especially since they don't have the thermal visor yet, so they aren't aware that that's going to be required. They're going to be checking this item in Lower Fungal Hall. We already know that's going to be an E-Tank. They might grab it anyways, but it looks like they're going to pass. 5 E-Tanks, I'd say that's not a bad decision. They've got plenty. Hello, Haldadrin. It's nice to speak to you. Do you want to tell us a bit about that run? That certainly was a run. I will say that much.
Yeah, that was super cursed.
Yeah.
But, yeah. At last, it was. It's over.
Yeah, you ended up coming out
me.
ahead. Even though you skipped a lot of things that XenoWars ended up doing, Flaagra, for example, you ended up not doing, and that paid off quite nicely. XenoWars actually did Flaagra, and there was not a lot there.
Yeah, at the end, I didn't have much thing to do than Flaagra and the frigate, so that was my next move, but my god.
Yeah, goodness gracious.
And what the speed?
The only major item you didn't get was the flamethrower. That speaks volumes, I would say.
Yeah, I don't like to validate the seed, so no flamethrower for me.
Of course, you know, obviously you still won the tournament, or the match.
Not yet. Indeed.
Not the tournament. That comes later. We'll see about that. Can you kind of go into some of your thinking when you had to make some tough decisions about the routing in this game?
Yeah, at first I had so many issues to find mothball bombs.
Yeah, that was a big point of contention.
I was like, no, it cannot be there, and it's that's my last check, and it's not. So I was a few times lost. I had no more clues, and then I thought, wait, I can go there. And when I saw the X-ray visor, I knew that with the possibility of the wave beam being behind X-ray, I had no many check left, because I found wave beam before X-ray, so that was out of logic. But yeah, that was pretty cursed. And Phazon in frigate without super missile. Okay.
That was pretty bad, I will admit. It's good that was the next check you found.
Yeah.
I imagine you were thinking right there, oh my god, is it on Flaagra?
I need to do Flaagra, yeah.
That would have been absolutely disastrous. Fortunately, that did not happen to you. That probably
Yeah.
would have cost you the race if that had happened.
Maybe, I don't know.
Hard to say, hard to say. This is a really strange scene. XenoWars actually took a lot of divergence from you. They ended up finding bombs later than you did. Part of that is just because they took a death in Magmoor very early on. That was quite unfortunate.
Oh, okay.
However, they did manage to find both X-ray visor and wave beam quite a bit before you did. It's just that they ended up having to do a lot of backtracking to go get it.
Okay, okay.
Because they ended up doing Lava Lake first, but rather than going to Talon side of Magmoor first.
Yeah, I was thinking there is more checks in this part of the Magmoor side, so that was logic for me to go there, but apparently the seed will disagree, so...
Yeah, Lava Lake is only one item, and without bombs, you cannot go to the other side of Magmoor, so I can understand your thinking. Initially, it looked like XenoWars might have been doing that, but he ended up not going for it.
Okay. That was fun. That was way longer than I thought. I almost did 100%, so...
Almost. And even just by items you actually went and picked up, that's 54%. That's a lot of items.
Yeah, I didn't pick a lot of items, so yeah, that's nice. I guess Flamethrower was on Flaagra or on the Ghost?
No. Flamethrower actually wasn't on Flaagra. You can see on XenoWars' screen, they still haven't got Flamethrower either. And they did both Flaagra and Ghosts.
Maybe...
Somebody in chat said Hydra.
Hydra? Oh yeah, I saw it. When I had X-ray, I saw it. Again, that's true.
Yeah, I couldn't quite tell what you were seeing. I think I might have been looking away.
It was a combo, but as I got all the other ones, that's Flamethrower for sure.
And obviously it couldn't have been supers for obvious reasons.
Yeah. But when I got supers, I forgot about Flamethrowers. I just wanted to end the race.
I mean, I wouldn't have gone all the way back there for Flamethrower anyways.
I know you like Flamethrower, guys, but that was too much for me. Okay.
Are there any other comments you'd like to make?
I don't know. Good luck for XenoWars for the next games, and I'd like to play again next week.
I guess we'll see you next mission then.
Yeah. Thanks.
It was an honor watching you play. Good job. GG.
Thanks.
Congrats
Bye.
on the victory. And that was a nice chance to speak with one of our runners, Haldadrin. We'll be getting that same chance for XenoWars in a few minutes. Or more likely, at least like 10, 15-ish, give or take. They already did Flaagra, so they don't have that, bothering them at the back of their minds, but it's possible that there are other things they forgot that I wasn't paying attention to. Again, sorry, split attention, so sometimes that happens. That is going to be their 5th artifact. One left. I don't know why XenoWars isn't jumping. Ordinarily during that little patch of Phazon, if you keep jumping out of the Phazon and back into it, you can actually save yourself quite a bit of health. Phazon damage scales with how long you've stood in it. So initially Phazon damage, as you're just entering it, will be very, very slow, but it will get much, much faster the longer you're in it. This is part of why Phazon Mining Tunnel is effectively impossible without a whole bunch of E-tanks. Because just being in it for that long, your damage scales ridiculously. It's very difficult. That's actually quite similar to some of the mechanics you see in Prime 3, like the Acid Rain on Pirate Homeworld. Or, for that matter, the Phazon in Prime 2, even if it didn't play as much of a part. We'll likely see XenoWars go up to check early mines now. No, instead XenoWars is going to head straight to the elevator. Now, with the knowledge we have, we know that's probably a good call if they end up doing Frigate. Because we know that there's nothing up there for them besides the thermal visor. Although it is possible that they end up going to check Thardas, which could be a bit unfortunate, because I'm now remembering that XenoWars did skip Thardas earlier. You can see that they do not have Wave Buster built out in their tracker, so we know they haven't done that yet. That is certainly entirely possible, although it doesn't look like they're going to be doing that. I certainly hope they aren't. So it'll be interesting to see whether they choose to go to Frigate or do something else entirely. Now, it's still up in the air exactly where they had, but it's most likely not going to be Phendrana. Fortunately, hopefully. Though they are climbing up these stairs, they could be heading there. Looks like that is where they're heading. I believe they did put off some of her early Phendrana. I can't remember how much exactly, but they're likely going to go through that. Not to mention, early Phendrana does have the last artifact they need, if memory serves. I believe they still don't have the one in Ice Ruins Glass. So they're probably going to go grab that now, in addition to doing some checks around here. They're going to be grabbing the missile expansion behind ice on Phendrana's shoreline. We already know that. There's nothing particularly interesting in Lighthouse. They're going to see that in a second. And they'll be doing this bit of jumping to get up to the artifact here. By jumping off of this baby Sheegoth onto that platform and then heading right over. you'll see them grab this quite quickly. That's their last artifact, but they still aren't in the hunt for Phazon soon. We already know it's in Frigate, so that means it'll be probably a good while before they even see it. Like, there's probably another 10 minutes or so in this seed. Assuming they don't take a death right now, which would be very unfortunate. They shouldn't, because there's not really that much here that can threaten them that greatly. Magmoor is a much more dangerous place to be, and they can see now that there's a nothing on Phendrana Canyon. Getting knocked down by the baby she got out of that jump. They have not yet checked Ice Ruins East. We know that's to be where main power bombs are lying, but that's two items there that they haven't seen yet. They're likely going to go check those. There's also two items, those being Thardus and the room, two rooms before Thardus. I forget what it's called, I apologize. I think it's Ruined Courtyard. Something like that. There's a lot of rooms in Metroid Prime that are ruined this or ruined that. It's a very common prefix they use. Now they're going to be warping to start, so that means they likely aren't going to be seeing main PVs. If they head straight to Frigate, looks like they're not, though. That's unfortunate. They're likely going to be taking care of some unfinished business in Chozo right now. We already saw most of Chozo from XenoWars, but there's still a bit left that they have to do, if I remember correctly. I can't quite recall which checks exactly they haven't gone to yet, because it's just such a long seed. But we'll see some get done shortly. There is the tree, they're going to check that right now. Oh, I know they already checked that earlier. That's nothing important. Yeah, I see some people in the chat. Only beginner level tricks are enabled for this tournament, so a lot of the tricks to get into Frigate early are more difficult than beginner and thus will not be required of runners. So, invisible objects is not required at any level, in fact, so they will be required to have thermal visor as well to enter Frigate in logic. XenoWars going to be doing this in Magmoor Pool. Unfortunately, they've forgotten that there's nothing important there at all. In fact, there's nothing there, just in general. Frigate is not an appealing location for a lot of reasons. There's only 3 items there. It's a very long section and very out of the way. So you tend to not go there very often. Well, invisible objects aren't enabled in this tournament at any difficulty. There's a number of reasons for that decision. For a start, it adds a lot of barrier for entry for new Metroid Prime players, expecting to be memorized the location of some things that you can't see. It's a bit onerous for some owners, you know. It adds some more expectations beyond the ordinary. Other tricks like bomb jumps and slope jumps, stand-hold terrain, you can usually kind of divine these just by understanding how the game works in a general sense, but invisible objects are a bit more difficult. we're likely going to be seeing the plasma lock part of stuff in statue right now. I don't believe either runner ended up doing that. Of course, they're not going to find anything here. We already know of that. There's nothing here. All of the major items already have their positions accounted for, so he's not going to be getting anything out of Chozo. Very unfortunate, but unknowable in the XenoWars position, so, you know, bit of a shame. We're likely going to see a check here. This is ordinarily, I believe, where you would find Ice Beam. This is another case where the door going into the room is different in type to the door going out. Occasionally, you'll see newer players soft blocking here because they go into this room without Ice Beam. Oh wait, I guess that room must have been checked earlier. I see it's orange. They must have been there already. But sometimes you'll see runners head into that room without Ice Beam, and then kind of just like they'll sort of feel mad at themselves because they actually didn't have the ability to get that item until they had Ice Beam, and now they're stuck in there. They have to go back to the last save. A little bit annoying, but that's just part of the game. Hopefully here we see them go to Frigate, but it looks like they might well, but very not. They're of course going to be checking Life Grove Tunnel and Life Grove itself. Like I said, this can be a little bit annoying. The geometry here has a lot of the you see a lot of the visual details in Prime are actually modeled in the level geometry too. So a lot of these like bumps and cracks in this room, you actually have to take those into account when you're doing the boosts here. It can be a bit of a nuisance to deal with. Yeah, Nico Baron, that's a good point you mentioned in chat. A lot of the time, more experienced runners maybe you'll see them do things that aren't necessarily possible at their stage of the game. At least not with the tricks that we allow in this tournament. So part of the difficulty is just remembering what you can and can't do in Logic. Especially now that so many tricks are going to be used. You'll see them save warping out. Oh, they're not heading to Frigate, as far as I can tell. They might head in through the front. But my initial guess is that they're probably going to go to Thardis, see the Wave Buster, get mad, and then go to Frigate. And you can see in the save screen there, they already have 7% of items collected. That's a very high percentage. You usually don't want to see such a high number there. Now they're going to be heading to Ice Ruins East and checking that. We already know that's where main power bombs are. Or not, they might go to Ice Temple first. Hard to say. Hard to say. I haven't checked either location in any case, so it's likely that they'll do both before going anywhere else. Appears they're going to be doing Ice Temple first, so that's going to be under the statue and Monoshiga. It's going to be sorely disappointed. There's going to be a nothing on Monoshiga, and I don't remember what was under the statue, but I think it was a power bomb expansion actually. Now that I remember it, but it isn't going to be what they're looking for. Now, fun fact about the game is that Monoshiga, just like a plated beetle, is one of these bosses that, if you start revisiting areas later on, you can actually see Monoshiga occur just as a natural enemy. There are not very many mini bosses in the game that work like that, but this is one of the few. In particular, Quarantine Cave can have Monoshiga spawn. After you defeat Thardus, of course. If they have not defeated Thardus, it will not happen. At least I don't think so. I don't remember the exact conditions for that layer change. And that's going to be their nothing item. They're hopeful. They're hopeful. And it's nothing. This is kind of why Phazon suit can be such an absolute terror to our runners. It can be anywhere, including in the worst possible places that you can never go. And Randomania is a very smart generator. It will put items in places if you can go to them. So these can actually occur quite a bit. Okay, now they're going to get into Ice Ruins East, grabbing their main PBs. And after they visit this room and see nothing, they're probably going to be heading for Ruined Courtyard, grabbing that item. I don't think they did that earlier. They might have done it, but I wasn't quite catching that. First item is that E-Tank. Yeah, there's a lot of differences between the Bash Prime's randomizer and the current Randomania model. The most noticeable is, of course, multi-world. One of the features that Randomania boasts now is multi-world games, where you can play a game with several other players, and you can find each other's items in your game. So, for example, at Thardus, it might have been somebody else's Wave Buster instead of XenoWars. And you can get in these big multiplayer sessions and play like that. The neatest part is that you can do it, and players don't necessarily even need to be playing the same game. We call this currently cross-game multi-world, but there's been some agitation for a term that's a less of a mouthful. So right now you're likely going to see Ruined Courtyard and maybe a Thardus check. Yeah, currently Randomania does not have a system to track ammunition. That is planned in future. There's been some work done on that, but currently it is just not implemented. But that'll be sometime later. The plan is to track it in roughly the same way that Randomania tracks health. Remember, Randomania was originally made for Metroid Prime 2, so tracking health was very, very important. And it was tracked just like ammunition was. So you'll have them measure out how much energy it takes to get from one point to another. So that never requires a player to do something they can't do with the amount of energy they have. This is important primarily because of Dark Aether, which is mandatory. You have to go to Dark Aether before you get the Dark Suit or the Light Suit in vanilla. So that comes up just a lot more than something like, say, Varialist Magmoor does in Prime 1 Rando. Yeah, that's right. Missile requirements in Prime 1 or Prime 2 rather, are just a lot less important. This is mostly because of how ammo drops work in Prime 2. In Prime 1, ammo drops are just kind of, you get them or you don't. And if you don't get them, well, that sucks, but that's life. Prime 2 is designed to improve upon this system in several ways. So if you're low in ammunition and you need some right now, there's a much, much, much higher chance that you'll be getting it if you break, say, a crate or an cache or whatever. The game is programmed to be almost guaranteed to give you it at a certain point if your ammo gets low enough. This is a very nice quality of life feature that many runners appreciate. There's some other differences, of course, but that's one of the first ones that people tend to notice after they started picking up Prime 2 in a speedrunning context. There's also some differences in movement. A lot of people I've heard say that Prime 2 just has much easier movement to control, even though it's not as fast as Prime 1, of course. Because they've removed a lot of the potential for some of the more outrageous tricks. Scan dashes are, of course, still entirely doable, but you'll see less of them in Prime 2. You'll also see more requirements for bosses. That's what things like the temple keys are meant to enforce, is that you actually have to, explore the region before you head to the bosses. You have to grab all 3 temple keys and 9 for the final area of the game. And the floating ink caches that you get the Sky Temple keys from cannot be destroyed without the Dark Visor. So that's another difference. Force Visor requirements. Dark Visor and Echo Visor both have things that require you to have them. Unlike Prime 1. Again, they did incorporate a lot of learning from Prime 1 into the development of Prime 2. I apologize if I'm kind of getting off topic a little bit, but we've already seen almost everything of this game. It's 2.5 hours, and I've already got things to talk about. So you'll have to forgive me a little if I'm veering a tiny bit off topic. XenoWars at this point must be quite confused as to where to head next. Again, Thardus still has not been done. It could be there, as far as they know. At least I don't think XenoWars did Thardus. I could be misremembering. Now, with Gravity Suit, you can actually do a slope jump there to get up instead of doing the longer method with the spider drag, which you just saw. Gravity Suit doesn't actually give you immunity to lava in this game, but it does make it so that you can move through it much more quickly. Yeah, XenoWars, I don't believe, has opened the bars yet. I don't remember seeing them do that. I remember them attempting a bar skip and failing, so that's unfortunate for them. Bar skip is a very difficult trick. It tends to haunt a lot of our runners in these runs because you can lose a lot of time doing it. Because it's just so hard and yet quite also important. No, I don't believe that XenoWars has gone to a main quarry, which is where they would have seen Thermal Visor. It was on the crane in main quarry, if memory serves. So there's some stuff in early mines that's also in Logic, which is likely what they're going to be doing right now. And they're not going to find it there. They're going to be finding Thermal Visor, but not Phazon Suit, of course. Yes, that seems quite likely to me as well, because obviously the Thermal Visor, or without Thermal Visor, oh, frigate's not in Logic. There's also the possibility that they just don't remember where the conduits are. Honestly, fair. I don't really remember where they are either. And yeah, it looks like they're going to be heading to mines. They're going to just go up into early mines from below. And you can kind of see how much time it can save just to be go to the right place at the right time. Because Haldadrin just ended up running into a lot of very, very important items much earlier than XenoWars. They didn't have to do nearly as much backtracking. We can see XenoWars is already at a point where they're almost 40 minutes behind the point where Haldadrin was done with the entire game. That just kind of goes to show you how much influence routing has. Far more than the deaths or the perhaps some slightly different movement. They've really been cautious by where they chose to go. Like if they had done this early mines stuff earlier, they would have seen thermal visor in main quarry. Oh, there's another power bomb. Oh, they already have main power bombs. I must have missed them going to my Ice Road East then. I apologize again. I missed a lot of things. If they had done this earlier, like I said, they would have most likely seen thermal visor, which would have saved them a lot of time. If they had then used that as a hint to go to frigate. The XenoWars has, however, been pretty stubborn in avoiding Thardus, which is good. We have not seen a Thardus fight from them. I apologize. I have to take a moment to take care of some IRL stuff. I'll be back in like a minute. It shouldn't be long at all. For the meantime, I'll just leave you with XenoWars gameplay. Alright, I'm back, and it appears that XenoWars is currently in elite research, and they're going to be grabbing this nothing. Or more likely not grabbing it. Again, the nothing has the same model as the suit, so it really is a bit of a cruel joke at this point. In Prime 2, the non-items are set to be the energy transfer modules model, which, fortunately for Prime 2 runners, is an item that does nothing whatsoever, even in the base game, so if somebody sees an ETM, whether or not it's the real ETM is irrelevant. Prime 1 runners, however, have to deal with this confusion, unfortunately. Going to be checking the artifact on Phazon Pirate. Oh yes, the model is variable in Randomania. But the basic, like, no item is here model is just this glitched looking suit. As more reverse engineering gets done on how models and textures and effects, etc. are stored in Metroid Prime, it's possible that enough reverse engineering will be done so that people can make custom models, and perhaps one of those will be used as the base no item is here model. But that remains to be seen. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. Specifically, you'll be seeing those games applied to cross-game model imports. Yes, Nico Baron, they actually did. They currently implemented the ability for Prime 1 models to appear in Prime 2, and I believe vice versa. There's still a little bit of ongoing development in that respect, but a lot of work had to be done to port those over. So now if you have both of your ISOs, you can actually make it generate so that models, particles, etc. will be extracted from one game and placed into the other. Like I said, though, a lot of work had to be done. It's not one-to-one. You can't just Control-C, Control-V, and then done. A lot of the internal mechanics around these features changed in the engine between the two games. So the particle systems differ quite a bit. Yeah, there's been quite a bit of development for Prime 2 and Prime 1, so you can see some proof of concept that shows it, but I don't think they've actually put that into a release version yet. But that's an answer. That's actually a really good question. And the answer is that they're not playing with 12 artifacts. In Metroid Prime, in vanilla, there are actually 12 artifact locations. However, for the sake of speed, although, as we can see here, that doesn't necessarily ensure anything at all. For the sake of speed, and so that they don't necessarily have to go just everywhere in the entire game, we play with only 6 artifacts. So that means that only 94 out of the original 100 locations have it. As I assume there's 100 locations in Prime, there might be some items that don't count towards percentage. I wouldn't remember off the top of my head. Point is, there's 6 empty spots, and there needs to be something in them. In Bastion's Randomizer, those would just be filled with missile expansions for some time. But currently we have these nothing items, which do and nothing whatsoever, to replace the artifacts that have been removed. Again, it is possible to play with 12 artifacts, or 9, or 7, or whatever cursed number that you feel like, as long as it's under 12, or equal to 12 for that matter. But for the sake of brevity, we play with 6. This prevents, again, if we play with 12 artifacts, most likely every region in the game would be hard required for those artifacts, and that's not very fun. Well, there still can be nothing items if you change other generation settings. For example, the way Randomania generates games is very, very tweakable. So, for example, you could play a game with no flamethrowers and a nothing item instead. Or you could play a game where every missile expansion was a flamethrower, or you could just basically do anything you want to change the item pool. It's very, very flexible in that regard. Of course, if you give it an item pool that you cannot beat the game with, so if you, like, for example, don't include Plasma Beam, it's not going to generate. Because it's going to say, oh hey, I tried, I couldn't, it couldn't be done, sorry. So you have to be a little bit careful with how you set up item pools so that you can actually get completable games. But besides that, there is, of course... Ah, yes, Nico Baron, thanks for reminding me. Charge Beam was a starting item. You'll see that quite often in tournaments where we'll set Charge Beam to just be either a starting item or in the previous tournaments it was a guaranteed location. A lot of the early tournaments, they would have it guaranteed to be in its vanilla location at a Watery Hall, so that you wouldn't have to go looking for it, because playing the Metroid Prime without the Charge Beam is just inconvenient. Charge Beam doesn't really lock checks that much. It technically does, like some things. For example, some of those ice sheets, walking into Phendrana for the first time can be destroyed with Charge Beam. But really, besides that, it doesn't do much except prevent you from using super missiles. So we give that A, so that we don't have to worry about people playing the game and doing actual combat without Charge Beam, and B, so that super missiles have a more of a chance to be relevant, like they were in this seed. There's very few things in this game that require super missiles, unlike in Prime 2. There's only a handful of checks that you need super missiles to access. And most of them you can inspect with X-rays. We saw this see, like the tree stump and the canister and Hydra, etc. Finally, XenoWars is going to be going to Frigate. They're going to be receiving the bad news very soon. Fortunately, they will find supers right after, if they don't get despondent and immediately go to starters, which they shouldn't. And after finding them, unfortunately, they'll be able to head back and want to start, and then complete the game. Yes, that will save them a bit. That is something quite fortunate. Heading into Frigate backwards can be a little bit faster than heading in through the front. XenoWars is now getting the bad news, realizes that it's not a no item because it has an ordinary texture. Textures do show up in X-Ray, by the way, it's not just the model. So a no item would actually look very different in X-Ray. Because you would be seeing all the, like, pixelated splotches around. Now, fortunately, this next item they're going to come across is going to be their super missiles. Well, they're not going to have a real bad day. And we do get to hear that beautiful Frigate music a second time. There's our super missiles, as mentioned previously. So now they're going to hop up, grab their Phazon suit, and get the hell out. That's my one allowed swear for the day. I'm done. Sorry. It's not often that you see seeds go on for this long, and they still haven't even gotten to Artifact Temple yet. We still have the whole final boss sequence to do. Oh, goodness. And that's going to be their Phazon suit. Give it a second to pop up on the tracker. Can those actually be destroyed with Flamethrower? There's a lot of odd things in this game, so that wouldn't really surprise me all that much. I can totally believe it. I think I already mentioned Flaagra being vulnerable to Wave Buster. I remember my co-commentator in my previous race mentioned that in Power Beam phase, you can damage Exo with Flamethrower as well. I heard something to that effect. So that can be marginally useful if you never find supers. Unfortunately, our runners did find supers. But fortunately, I should say. Because that will make Exo go a bit faster. XenoWars does not have a Wave Buster, not that he needed one. Unlike our previous winner, Haldadrin, who had only 100 missiles, XenoWars is going to be heading with 125. Much, much higher count. That's 25% more, in fact. As I'm sure most of you at home could calculate, but that's going to make things a little bit smoother during the Exo fight. With the amount of E-tanks that XenoWars has, I'm not really worried about a death, but it's still possible. This should be pretty smooth. We just have to see phases 1 and 3 of Metroid, and then, of course, afterwards we're going to be seeing just the trek through Impact Crater and the death of Metroid Prime. And by the way, wonderful thanks to our tracker, Young Death. They unfortunately have to leave, but there's not really anything left for them to track, so whatever. XenoWars doing the boost ball, the trick we mentioned earlier, to skip straight to phase 3. And again, I would like to thank Young Death. It really was a help. We ended up having to get a tracker for our stream at pretty much the last minute. So it's very appreciated to have them volunteer. Yeah, XenoWars could have very easily decided to simply DNF. It's very. They have a lot of determination to continue to playing the seed after that much nonsense happened to them. I do not envy their position in the slightest. I probably would have done a frigate much earlier than either runner, but that's just because I am a little bit funny. Sometimes I prioritize checks by how much I like that area of the game rather than how likely it is to reward me. Yeah, Ridley's being a bit rude right now. Now, one of the intricacies is learning in this part how to manually aim your arm cannon towards the Ridley's mouth manually, because if you just lock on, there are parts where your aim will not hit Ridley in the mouth and will not stun him and allow you to target his chest. So you have to learn to kind of just like manually drift its aim a bit up and to the right, usually, to hit Ridley while he's doing his yawn, or else you're just going to be waiting a whole lot longer. It's a very, very difficult thing for runners to do. It requires a lot of, mostly practice. There's a lot of skill to it as well, but little things like that can make your Ridley fights quite a bit faster, especially in Phase 3. Well, exclusively in Phase 3, I should say. XenoWars going to be taking the save in Impact Crater. Would want to do Ridley again. Not that they will be, most likely. It's as bad as safe as Impact Crater can get in these races. Yeah, there's an element of that, but getting it consistently requires some pretty serious practice. XenoWars is opting not to climb the hill for fear of Jack and Jill, presumably, or perhaps due to a lack of desire for that slope jumping. It's a bit tricky to get up there if you don't know what you're doing too well. So he's going to be taking the long way around to get up the main room in Impact Crater. Again, there's only one room between this room and Exo, so it's not like a big deal or anything. Hardly makes a difference. One thing that's kind of curious about this game is the orange Phazon in this area. This never shows up in any other Metroid Prime game. It only shows up in this area. There's the possibility that this was meant as like a plot point in later games, but it obviously never came out. I mean, we know that now, of course. So. And we can already see XenoWars taking advantage of their many beam combos. They're going to be launching some super missiles at Metroid Prime for extra damage. That's phase 1 of Exo down. Now we're into phase 2, where Ice Beam will be getting added into the mix. Missing that first Ice Spreader shot, that's very unfortunate. One of the Ice Spreader's perks is actually being easier to aim, but Exo has a very specific place you got to hit, or else they will get no damage whatsoever. It'll just bounce off its shell. Now this is going to be the third phase of the Exo fight. We have every beam currently in the pattern. Now during phase 3, Exo is still playing more or less by the rules, but phase 4, we'll see all the beams still be there, but Exo will have the freedom to do whatever it likes, and that can be a little bit inconvenient for our runners. Yes, there are some people who will say that, but the greater consistency of hits is just, in my opinion, worth a lot more for most runners. There are some who may well choose to voluntarily go for charge shots with Ice Beam, but more power to them, but it's a very difficult thing to do since Exo moves around a reasonable bit. Alright, that's phase 3 down. We're going into phase 4 of Exo. Like I said, this is the most chaotic phase. This is where, if any time loss happens, it's usually going to happen in phase 4. And like we see there, Exo charged very, very early out of the gate. And is doing so again right here. Now, XenoWars is currently over an hour ahead of the time that Haldadrin finished at. Again, that kind of shows how much routing decisions can really factor into final times. It's really unfortunate, but XenoWars didn't necessarily do anything wrong. A lot of their plays were pretty fair, they made a lot of sense, given that the circumstances they were playing with. That's kind of why they were actually fairly ahead early on, but the routing decisions ended up working against them just due to how, we'll call it, silly this seed is. We threw rather a lot of nasty stuff at our runners, and Haldadrin's strategy just ended up being the one that worked better, at least in this context. Hopefully in a few minutes after Essence, we'll be able to get XenoWars' side of the story, have a little chat with them, hear about some of their thought processes. Like I mentioned earlier, they're using partially a strategy which will allow them to get more bang for their buck with these Phazon pools. Yes, Nico Baron, yes, that's definitely a big part of it, is finding bombs much later than Haldadrin did. So it ended up that X-Ray ended up sort of hurting them more than it helped them. Because X-Ray led to Wave, and Wave led to a lot of the map opening. Unfortunately for them, bombs didn't require Wave, so when Haldadrin had a very narrow field for possible bomb locations, XenoWars had a very wide one, so they wouldn't find it until much later. I think that was a big reason why they were so far behind. Because of course XenoWars needed bombs, and they needed bombs quite a lot to progress, but there was so much else that they could have done and ended up doing that they just never saw it until it was much too late. Still a very talented runner. It's just a lot of the challenge comes from figuring out where to go rather than simple execution, and that's really where the difference in these two runs comes in. Just the simple decision to go to a lava lake so early ended up inadvertently almost costing the run, essentially. Well, it did sort of cost the run, but it's hard to say if that alone would have been enough. Again, these are both very talented players, so you can already sort of... This isn't just like somebody being bad every game or anything like that, to be 100% clear. It's just a very tricky and nuanced sort of field. Comparatively, just normal Metroid Prime is a lot more predictable, and you wouldn't have such these very wide swings in time. And that is going to be time for XenoWars. We'll be able to get them, hopefully, into the Discord call and talk with them in a minute here. GG to our runners. That marks the end of the race at just under 3 hours. Goodness gracious, I'm definitely glad that there isn't another run on SG6 after this one. Because they would have been waiting for quite a while. And roll credit. Yeah, a lot of the tricks in Prime are deceptively simple. You could find that if you just sit down and, like, even without a guide, just try to do what you see the people do in the stream, you'll have a lot more success than you might initially think. So I thought that's part of the appeal of Prime, is that what you see is what you get in a lot of ways. It's very much a game where your visual feedback is very on point. Sure, with some of the more advanced tricks like out of bounds, that sort of goes out the window, but Prime games don't really tend to deceive you in terms of your visuals. Despite all that time difference, there was only ended up being a 5% delta, which makes sense, of course, because they had 5 more missile packs. Alright, now we're going to see XenoWars do it all over again. You're actually trapped here forever. We're going to see the same Metroid Prime speedrun for the next 12 years. Kidding, of course. I haven't yet gotten a response from XenoWars, so I don't know if they'll be joining us for commentary or not. I'll give it 5 minutes. But after that, I'll probably just end the stream. Hello, XenoWars. I want to talk to you about that incredible run.
Yeah.
That certainly was something. I'll say that.
Early in the scene when I went to craft frigate, I was even the sunken frigate.
Yeah, that was honestly... Whew, that was something, it certainly was. I do not blame you for putting that off for so long. Especially since Thermal Visor was one of the last items you've ended up finding.
And I knew there was two look-alike in Magma Pool too. That's why I left mines right away.
Yeah. Haldadrin actually finished quite a bit ahead of you. There's a couple of reasons for that. First is the deaths you took. That's never great, but that was not by far what put you behind. The biggest issue was the hunt for bombs. Actually, the hunt for Phazon was actually relatively minor. Haldadrin did almost everything you did besides Flaagra, and they still managed to get quite a bit ahead.
Where were bombs again?
Our bombs were in that bit in Magma Pool, not behind the wall, but the tunnel.
Yeah.
The difference is that you ended up getting X-ray and Wave Beam very, very quickly. And that ended up being actually a disadvantage because you had a lot more of the game open up that was not required to go get bombs.
Yeah.
So whereas Haldadrin had a much more restrained searching scope and ended up not going to Lava Lake until after they had bombs. You did have that wide array of possibilities, and that ended up leading you on a bit of a wild goose chase.
Mm-hmm. Because it went towards workstation first.
Yes. You went into late Magmoor and ended up taking your death and then going straight back in. So that was not very convenient. That ended up being a double-edged blade as it happened.
Yeah.
Any comments about the seed? Like just anything in general.
It was
you'd
a
like to
good
say?
seed. I just did some stuff wrong.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that sentiment. It definitely was a fun seed, but it's definitely not the kind of seed that you expect to get, especially on tournament settings. And that's what would trip a lot of people up. And is there anything else you'd like to comment on before we wrap up the stream?
Well, I can't wait till the Phazon suit hint if that's going to be a thing.
Yes, I hope hints come soon to Prime 1. It's on the docket. I don't know if anybody's working on it right this second. Probably not, but that'll be quite nice to have.
Yeah.
So right now, the only hints are, of course, for artifacts, and that's not the most helpful. Artifacts, obviously, you need them, so it's good to have hints for them, but
Yeah.
just that feels like it's a little bit not enough at times.
X-ray was on the main plaza ledge, right?
No, X-ray was in Lava Lake, remember? That's part of why it took Haldadrin much longer to find Wave Beam, because he didn't go to Lava Lake just because it was just one item. Why would he?
I would have done Root Cave even if I didn't have X-ray though.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think Haldadrin actually did it with that too. I think he got Lava Lake item after he got bombs.
Yeah.
I might be misremembering though.
With Morse Ball, that gave the whole second half of Chozo, so I wanted to do that before going back to Talon.
Yeah, understandable. The Vault Ledge is what had a various suit. You might be getting confused there. I think that's why you were misremembering.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember that now.
Alright, is that about everything you wanted to say?
I think so, yeah.
Alright, it was great having you. It was a wonderful run, a good game. Congrats for your time. It was certainly a very good run that you put on, even if it had some shortcomings, but
Yeah.
You are a very good player. Good job, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go ahead and end the stream right now.
Yeah.